Hello and welcome back to Oppidan Talks with Henry and Walter. Today we have a fantastic guest with us, Mr. Nick Mason, CBE. It's impossible to give an adequate introduction to a man who has experienced and seen quite as much as Nick Mason. Nick was a founding member of one of the world's most famous music groups, Pink Floyd. Through the 70s, he played drums all around the world to sell out crowds before the band disbanded in the 1980s. And beyond a glittering music career, Nick is also famously passionate about cars, racing the most famous of classic cars and potentially having owned more than 40 Ferraris, to be confirmed. Not done with music though, since 2018, Nick has been on tour again with his own group, Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets. Nick, we're really grateful to have you with us today. Thank you.
Pleased to be here.
Nick, thank you for joining. As you might know, we're an education business. We believe in the importance of a mentor. I think it would be churlish of me to start in any other manner than to ask about that song, Another Brick in the Wall. You say, we don't need no education. Teachers, leave them kids alone. Do you really think that? What was your education like growing up?
Well, it was pretty good. Can you hear me? Because I've just lost you.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Oh no, here I am again. I think there's a couple of things to say. First of all, the lyrics to "We Don't Need No Education" were very much geared to a particular period of schooling and a particular attitude amongst, I think, hopefully, an attitude that no longer really exists, where teachers were sort of disciplinarians and the cane was the order of the day. And my education was quite jolly, really, because I went to prep school in London and then went to a school called Frensham Heights, which was a co-ed school. And 60 years ago, co-ed was fairly progressive. And so I really had one of those things where I enjoyed my school days.
Did you get good reports at the Hall? We'll definitely have a few boys from the Hall watching this. What were your end of term reports like?
Okay, I have to be honest, I never really took to the Hall. It may be the Iron Cross on the pink uniform that I always found a bit peculiar, but it was, when I was at the Hall, it was pretty sort of, they were still using the cane, although I was never caned myself.
And can I ask, you were trained as an architect. Mm-hmm. Were there comparative skills in your music career from that training?
Well, that's a sort of good starter point in a way, because I think you always use skills, whatever they are. The big thing is that you can utilize almost anything you learn in whatever you end up doing. You know, so you might train to be a chef, but actually you can use that in architecture or music.
And did you have drum lessons when you were a boy?
No. I had music lessons on the violin and piano, which did me no good at all. And then took up the drums, and I've never had a drum lesson, which is not the way forward that I would recommend. I think drum lessons are actually a very, very good thing. And I wish I had actually had formal training as well.
So is that rhythm just sort of ingrained in your psyche? Is it just in your blood? Or was there a kind of ulterior or perhaps different catalyst that got you into playing the drums?
I got into playing the drums because I discovered rock and roll along with a few friends of mine. And so the decision was to start a band, but someone had already bought a guitar. So that job opportunity had gone. And the last thing I was going to do was end up being the bass player. So it was the drums for me.
It sounds pretty simple. And then if we look through the late 60s, you are the founding member, or one of the founding members of really psychedelic music. At the time, did you know that you were creating something different, or was that only with hindsight that you realized that?
I think we knew we were doing something slightly different, but it was sort of the original sort of Pink Floyd repertoire, first of all, started as just being a regular, almost R&B group. That's what we had our sights set on. And then over a period of time, there was a realization that actually most successful bands had to have their own material, that you wouldn't succeed just by playing other people's songs. And we were very fortunate in having Syd Barrett, who was a great songwriter. And although, yes, we are known as the sort of psychedelic band, actually a lot of the music was anything but. It was almost lyrical folk songs.
Mm.
May I ask what? Go ahead, Walter.
Well, you co-wrote several famous Pink Floyd tracks. Can you tell us about the process of writing songs?
Well, I'm not really a songwriter. I mean, where I tended to be most involved was when we were improvising together, which we did in things like Interstellar Overdrive, or songs like that. I mean, in a way, the Syd Barrett era was one writer, and then really Roger Waters became the primary writer for Pink Floyd.
And what was the change like when Syd left? How did that affect the style and the band dynamic?
Sorry, every now and again it's dropping out.
Don't worry, you've got that there. I think you're back now. My question was, when Syd left, what was the dynamic like, the change with the band and the style of the band?
Well, it was rather extraordinary when Syd left, because he had been the front man and main writer, but he'd become so unstable that it was actually a huge relief. And in a way, it was remarkable that we had the sort of confidence to carry on without him.
And were there arguments in the consecutive years thereafter? Were there any great blowouts on tour?
Well, not for the next 3 or 4 years. I mean, I think relationships became more difficult in terms of working together much further down the line, in the sort of, I suppose, late 70s almost. But in a way, around 72, 73, the period when we made Dark Side of the Moon, we had a pretty good operating system. And something like Dark Side was actually one of those sort of projects that utilized everyone in the band using their various different skills.
And it clearly paid off, because I think it's the 3rd best-selling album of all time. For those listening, Pink Floyd are, in the same breath as the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Elvis. I believe you used the proceeds to buy your car. Is that right?
Yeah, cars, I think, might be more accurate description.
What did you buy?
I'd always, I mean, I actually had cars in my life long before rock and roll was even invented. My dad was a documentary filmmaker and made films primarily about sort of mechanical things. He did a lot of work for Shell. And he raced himself. And when I was a small boy, being taken to Silverstone was the sort of ultimate day out. So actually, as I say, I was sort of going motor racing well even before Bill Haley had sort of hit the big time.
Can I ask you, what, in your mindset, what is it that's so special about cars? What really gets you going for cars?
Well, I suppose it's really motor racing for me. I mean, I like mechanical things, toys to proper machinery, whether it's cars, but I like cars with a purpose, so mainly racing cars. But anything aeronautical, same thing, really.
And it is the 40 Ferraris line, is that true?
No, absolutely not.
Oh.
I'm always painted as being the sort of Ferrari collector, but that's actually entirely wrong. I never wanted to be a car collector. I wanted to go motor racing. What happened was that I was able to buy the racing car and then keep it and buy something faster or different for a different class.
And you've done some pretty special races, haven't you? I know you've done Le Mans 24 a few times. What was that like?
Well, that for me was the sort of pinnacle of where I wanted to get to. I mean, I've never really thought of becoming a professional race driver. That is, I think you need really very special skills for that. But I really enjoyed being an amateur driver. And the great thing about the Le Mans 24-hour race was certainly sort of 30 years ago, you could actually enter as an amateur, but still you could actually finish quite well because reliability was down on, was very different then. I mean, motor racing now, most cars finish unless they crash.
And I want to, before we move on to our sort of culmination of the interview with a few quick fire questions, I want to go back a bit into the Pink Floyd stuff too. Early on, you're reaching this kind of world recognition and traveling the world. What was that like? Was that just thrilling and exciting? Was it scary? Did you get nervous before a big show? I would love to hear a little insight into that kind of early growth stage, I guess.
Well, I think like most people who have sort of it seems normal, I think would be the way to put it. You don't think this is wildly exciting. You think it's actually, there's an element of it that's work. So you're really actually trying to make it better or trying to learn how to do something or whatever. So it's far less glamorous than you think. You know, a lot of the time you're traveling. So you're in recording studios. I love recording studios.
What's that last half hour like before you head on stage? What did you have, a sort of set routine like a sports star? Was there a kind of final warm up and?
Not really. The last half hour would probably be spent chasing so-called friends out of the band room, making them go to watch the show rather than helping themselves to our champagne or whatever it was.
Nick, I wanted to ask, you mentioned the recording studio there. I asked earlier in the chat about the process of writing songs. So, when Gilmour and Walters were, in the band together, it's been well documented that they didn't massively get on. When you've got such creative styles and different ways of working, how does it all come together in an album like Dark Side of the Moon? I mean, that must have been testing for you, I imagine.
No, I think what I was saying earlier was that Dark Side's a very good example of everyone, working together. I mean, I think the problem with being in a band is that for a long time is that you will grow up a bit and find that you have different interests, or you want it to go in a different way, or some people maybe want to go touring for longer or work for longer in the studio. So the differences came much further down the line, and they're always sort of lumped together as musical differences. But I think basically Roger really wanted to work on his own and spent far too long in a band when he should probably have headed off into the sunset earlier.
And you've played on some of the biggest stages in the world. One anomaly is Glastonbury, which perhaps we can come to later, but you obviously played that famous day at Live Aid. I think Gilmour said it was like sleeping with your ex. What's your memory of that day?
Oh, I thought it was terrific, because I thought the fact that we actually could get on stage together and do the show was quite grown up, really, rather than all sulking and saying, no, we wouldn't do it. I thought it was a good example. I mean, I thought it was a good sort of demonstration to our children, if no one else, that that we could actually do something together for the right reasons.
And then really recently, only 2018, you got a band back together, you stuck your name on it, and you've traveled the world again. What made you decide to get back on the kit, so to speak?
I think the best thing about music is playing it live. Recording music is interesting and a good way of spending time, but the great thrill is to actually play to an audience. And I really sort of missed that. And what was terrific about the Sources was that the scale of it meant that it really was a return to live playing with an audience where you could actually see the entirety of your audience. You know, the trouble with stadium gigs is that you're playing to about sort of 70,000 people, and there's another 20,000 people who are either doing drugs or playing frisbee at the back of the stadium.
And so plans to continue with that and to do more of it and keep pushing forward?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we've, you know, because of COVID-19, basically what's happened is we've had to rebook a tour for into next year. We were due to be touring this year. And we're just sort of fingers crossed that it will be possible to play live in not too distant future.
Nick, I want to ask about the V&A exhibition and kind of Pink Floyd in the modern era in a second, but I wanted to just ask you about one thing. So there's a line in Money, I think, which says, 2-car caviar, 4-star daydream, think I'll buy me a football team. You did buy a football team, didn't you? Or you certainly helped. You certainly helped a certain football team out of administration.
Yes, that's true.
Can you tell us about your role with Bolton?
Well, first of all, my my commitment to football is fairly slight. I still am a little hazy on the offside rule, but I have a friend, a woman called Sharon Britton, who for many years has looked after my sort of business interests and done a fantastic job. And she is very connected to Bolton and always wanted to support Bolton. And so when they were in trouble, she was the one who wanted to save it, basically. And it was an opportunity for me really to support Sharon in what she wanted to do. I'm very happy to do it. And I think she will inevitably make it work.
Well, it's a fulfillment of a line, which is brilliant as well. I know we've got lots of more questions, and we normally do this live, and there's questions streaming in, but we do have lots more. So Pink Floyd in the current era, the V&A exhibition was thought of unanimously as a massive success. It certainly brought Pink Floyd to many who perhaps hadn't heard your music or seen what you did so well in the 60s and 70s and 80s. What was your view of that exhibition? Did it exhibit Pink Floyd in the way that you wanted it to do?
Yeah, first of all, I loved working on it. It was a great team of people. We had Sennheiser, who provided some of the really smart tech stuff. But the only issue I have with it, one was that it made us look cleverer than we were, because everything became, you sort of moved from gallery to gallery, and it looked as though it had just been one seamless sort of development of the band. It was a lot more muddled than that in real life, I think. But the other thing was that, particularly doing promotion for it, it became more and more, I began to feel like a building belonging to the National Trust, and that fairly soon tourists would be sort of taking a trip around me. It became all about history, and it was part of the driving force that got me to get involved with the Sources project, because the one thing missing was the actual playing of music.
Well, it was a fantastic exhibition, and let's hope something like that exists again for those younger than us. So before we finish, we have some very simple quick fire questions. As short an answer as you can handle is fine, and we'll see what we spit out. So I'm going to start, which is, Nick, what is your favorite car? You have to choose one.
Ferrari 250 GTO, 1962.
It's a valuable car, that one too. Good investment.
It makes me look clever as well as being a joy to drive.
Thanks.
Nick, what's your favorite Pink Floyd song?
Probably Comfortably Numb, because it's got a great, great guitar solo that's great to play drums along with it.
Favorite non-Pink Floyd song?
Tricky, probably a Bob Dylan song, because I think he's still the greatest writer of all. So let's say Blowing in the Wind.
I'd like to ask a difficult question. Which band would you have liked to have been in if it wasn't for Pink Floyd?
Either Cream or Hendrix.
Greatest venue played?
Probably playing on a barge off St. Mark's Square in Venice.
Why was that so good?
Because it was the most peculiar and extraordinary thing to be playing, more or less moored up in the Grand Canal, playing to an audience on shore, surrounded by gondoliers and small boats.
Nice. You've got two brilliant, lots of, what do I want to say? My question is, what's the last piece of advice you gave?
Well, I get the last piece of advice I've already given right at the beginning of this interview. This is a slightly longer answer, but I'll run through it. There's always this thing about, how to succeed, follow your dreams, follow your heart, all that. Actually, far more useful, I think, was some advice was given by Chris Hadfield, who was the astronaut who wrote a book called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Now, what he did was he holds the, I think he's done more spacewalking than any other astronaut. But what he did was he worked really hard to become an astronaut, but then while he was training with the Americans, they kept offering all the astronauts opportunities to learn other skills, one of which was to learn to speak Russian. And he signed up for that. And a couple of years later, the Americans cancelled their space program, and the Russians looked to see if there were any American astronauts who spoke Russian. Whereupon, of course, he jumped ship and flew with them. And I think this comes back to this thing. The one thing you can do is you can utilize almost any skill you learn, whether it's a language skill, even though it doesn't directly relate to what you want to do. You might as well pick up as many of these sort of skills, as I've said, whether it's cooking or speaking Russian, to help you on your way. You'll find a way of using it.
Spoken like a man who taught himself the drums. That's fantastic advice. And I've got one final question to finish off, which is that what is there left to achieve? What would you love to achieve next, Nick?
I think rather than sort of new things, just get better at whatever it is we're doing or I'm doing. So the skills that I have, I'd like to improve on, whether it be flying or drumming or putting a show together.
Well, that's good advice too. Hone your craft. Nick, you're very kind to join us. Thank you. It's been fascinating speaking to you. And I know that we're going to have a lot of parents leaning over children listening to great advice and good stories along the way too. So thank you. If we would love, before you go, hassle you into a very, very short 20-second game and see whether you can be champion of Biscuit Face. We've had someone achieve it in 6 seconds, but a lot of people not achieve it. And the great news is that someone out there might just say one day, I challenged Nick Mason at Biscuit Face. So if you're ready to take it away, I'll count off the clock, and we'll see whether we can get a Pink Floyd Biscuit Face winner.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not holding much hope out for this.
Optimism.
I'll select a ginger biscuit. I think the chocolate biscuit could be a recipe for disaster.
Well, when we edit this, we're going to do it to Wish You Were Here.
All right. So you better talk me through how I have to do it.
Very simple. From the forehead to the mouth, if you can, without touching your face with your hands now. Good luck.
Thank you.
You get more than one go.
Oh, no one's not. Oh.
You've got about 20 seconds left.
Oh.
We don't think a musician has completed Biscuit Face. I know you've been on Top Gear, so you do know the Top Gear, the competition, but this is equally competitive.
You've got one more go.
No, I'm not feeling confident. Oh, no.
Nick, it's a great effort, but we're going to stop you there. Do you know what? I know that your younger self with that epic handlebar moustache, it probably would
yes.
work. Because the guy who did best at this, he had a beard, and I think it trapped the biscuit halfway down his face.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to come back next time with a fully fledged...
I'll start growing a beard now.
Yeah.
Nick, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
I speak for many, but I'm going to go and listen to most of your albums now, and remember the joy of this interview. So thank you for your time.
Nick, thank you so much. We're going to send you back into the ether. We appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Nick.
What a
Simply put, an absolute legend of the world, not just the music world. I just know that those having just watched this may not appreciate what a big deal he is. And Walter, how did you find that?
Just a kind of a bit overwhelming. I mean, he's a rock star, and anyone who grew up in the late 60s, 70s, for us, that's like interviewing, Chris Martin. So amazing.
He's a well-spoken, dry, very, very funny chap too.
What's your favorite Pink Floyd song, Hen?
I'm a bit of a soppy one for Wish You Were Here, but some of the psychedelic stuff is great. And for those who haven't, they should look up his live tour shows next year, because they are fantastic. He brings together some of the original Pink Floyd music with a new band and sort of sits center stage on a podium with 10 different drum kits, absolutely hammering it out. It's very cool to watch.
Amazing.
On that note, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you many more great speakers and Oppidan talks in the coming weeks. Walter, thank you.
Thanks for your time. See you next time.